The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was elbow deep in client paperwork at my small architectural firm when my phone buzzed with news that would change everything. Aunt Eleanor had passed away. "Ms. Reed, this is Jonathan Blackwood from Blackwood and Associates," the voice said. "I'm handling your Aunt Eleanor Reed's estate. Would you be able to attend the will reading this Friday?" I hadn't seen Aunt Eleanor in 5 years, not since that last Christmas when my cousins Derek and Victoria had practically staged a coup at the family dinner, insisting she move into assisted living and let them manage her considerable assets. I'd stood up for her then, arguing that at 75, she was sharp as ever and perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. That hadn't gone over well with the family. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What time?" Friday morning found me sitting in an elegant conference room at Blackwood and Associates, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Derek and Victoria. They sat across the table, Derek in his custom Italian suit and Victoria draped in what looked like half of Tiffany's inventory. "Now that everyone's here," Mr. Blackwood began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "let's proceed with the reading of Eleanor Reed's last will and testament." What followed was exactly what Derek and Victoria had engineered over the past 5 years. The main estate, worth nearly $12 million, was split between them. The investment portfolio, another $8 million, likewise divided. The art collection, the cars, the vacation properties, all distributed between the two of them. I sat quietly, remembering the summers I'd spent with Aunt Eleanor at her beach house, learning about architecture as she taught me to appreciate the elegant simplicity of the old wooden structure. She'd been the one who'd encouraged me to pursue my dreams of becoming an architect, even helping to pay for my education when my parents couldn't afford it. And finally, Mr. Blackwood continued, to my niece Alexandra Reed, had leased my beach property at 1247 Ocean Drive, Little Hampton, along with all its contents and associated land rights. Derek actually snorted. Victoria didn't bother hiding her smirk. "The shack?" Derek said incredulously. "You're leaving Alex the shack." The beach house had been Aunt Eleanor's first home, purchased back in the 1970s when Little Hampton was nothing but a sleepy fishing village. Now it sat, weathered and small, among million-dollar mansions that had sprung up around it. I'd always loved its stubborn defiance of the modern world around it. There were also some personal effects, Mr. Blackwood added, sliding a small envelope across the table to me. "Your aunt left this letter for you as well." Victoria stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Well, that's settled then. Derek, shall we discuss the estate sale? I think Sotheby's would be best for the art collection." I waited until they left before opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of Aunt Eleanor's distinctive stationery, her elegant handwriting flowing across the page. "My dearest Alexandra, if you're reading this, then they think they've won. Derek and Victoria have spent years trying to convince me I was losing my mind, all to get their hands on what they saw as their rightful inheritance. But they never understood what real value is. The beach house is yours now, my dear. I know you'll appreciate it in a way they never could. Remember what I taught you about architecture. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. Watch the tide lines during the storm season, especially around the old boat shed. There's more to that property than meets the eye. All my love, Aunt Eleanor." P.S. check behind the loose board in the kitchen, the one by the window. "I left something there for you." I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my jacket pocket. Outside, dark clouds were gathering over the city, promising a significant storm system moving up the coast. The weather report had warned about potential coastal flooding and erosion. That evening, I drove out to Little Hampton. The old key Mr. Blackwood had given me feeling heavy in my pocket. The beach house stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its weathered gray siding and slightly crooked shutters a stark contrast to the towering modern homes on either side. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The old wooden floors creaked welcomingly under my feet as I made my way to the kitchen. The loose board Aunt Eleanor mentioned was right where it had always been, rattling slightly in the growing wind outside. I pried it up carefully, reaching into the dark space beneath. My fingers touched something cold and metallic, an old tin box, the kind that once held Christmas cookies. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, dating back to the 1970s. They showed the beach house and the surrounding property from various angles, but particularly focused on the old boat shed and the tide lane. But more importantly, there were documents, survey maps, property deeds, and what looked like geological surveys, all carefully preserved. As I spread them out on the kitchen table, the wind outside picked up, and the first heavy drops of rain began to hit the windows. A massive crack of thunder made me jump, and then the storm hit in earnest. I spent hours poring over the documents as the storm raged outside, pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place. The geological surveys, the old property lines, the careful documentation of the tides. Aunt Eleanor had been recording something, tracking changes over decades. Around midnight, the storm intensified. Through the kitchen window, I could see massive waves crashing against the beach, much closer to the house than I remember from my childhood. The old boat shed, perched right at the edge of the property, looked like it might not survive the night. That's when I noticed something strange. As the waves pulled back, they were taking huge amounts of sand with them. And in the brief illumination of lightning strikes, I could see something beneath the eroding beach. Something that shouldn't have been there. I grabbed my raincoat and a flashlight, fighting my way through the wind to the boat shed. The waves had carved away nearly 6 feet of sand, revealing what looked like stone? No, not stone. Concrete. My architectural training kicked in as I shone the flashlight over the exposed structure. This wasn't just some old foundation. This was engineered, intentionally hidden. The boat shed wasn't just sitting on the beach. It was sitting on top of something much larger, something that had been carefully buried decades ago. As I stood there in the howling wind, rain soaking through my coat, I remembered something from my architectural history classes about this coast during World War II. About hidden bunkers and storage facilities, about valuable assets moved away from major cities. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Hope your shack hasn't blown away in the storm. Derek and I are meeting with the estate lawyers tomorrow to begin liquidating everything. Don't worry, we'll send you pictures of the mansion before it sells. I smiled, thinking about the documents spread across the kitchen table, about the concrete structure being revealed by the storm, and about Aunt Eleanor's patient, decades-long documentation. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed, but first, I had some calls to make, starting with the State Historical Society. Looking back at the house, I whispered, "Thank you, Aunt Eleanor. I think I understand now what you meant about real value." The storm continued to rage, but I barely noticed it anymore. I was too busy planning my next moves, knowing that Derek and Victoria's victory celebration was about to be cut very, very short. Dawn broke over Little Hampton Beach, revealing the storm's true impact. The churning waves had exposed nearly 30 feet of the concrete structure, and I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. A small crowd of locals had gathered at the property line, pointing and speculating about what lay beneath the sand. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since sunrise. First, it was the local historical society practically tripping over themselves with excitement. Then came calls from the State Preservation Office, 2 maritime archaeology professors, and finally, the one I've been waiting for, the auction house. Ms. Reed, the curator's voice practically vibrated with contained enthusiasm. If what you're describing is authentic, this could be one of the most significant historical finds on the eastern seaboard in decades. I looked down at the documents spread across Aunt Eleanor's kitchen table, particularly at one yellowed photograph dated 1944. It showed a massive concrete structure being carefully concealed beneath the dunes, with notes in my aunt's elegant handwriting. Father's wartime contract. Private storage facility for wealthy European clients. Location classified until 2025. Oh, it's authentic, I replied, smiling as I watched Derek's silver Mercedes pull up outside. Right on schedule. But I believe my cousins are here now. Could we continue this conversation later? Say, after Monday's auction. Derek and Victoria burst through the front door without knocking, their designer clothes hilariously out of place in the humble beach house. What's going on? Derek demanded, his face flushed. We've been getting calls all morning about some kind of discovery on this worthless piece off. He stopped short, staring through the kitchen window at the growing crowd outside. Victoria pushed past him, her high heels clacking on the old wooden floors. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. This property was clearly meant to be part of the main estate. There must have been some mistake in the will. I calmly gathered up Aunt Eleanor's documents, tucking them into my briefcase. No mistake, Victoria. Aunt Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. Would either of you like to see what she left me? Besides this worthless beach house, I mean. Their expressions as I led them down to the beach were worth every moment of their previous smugness. The morning sun clearly illuminated what the storm had revealed. A massive concrete bunker entrance, its heavy steel doors still intact beneath decades of sand and salt air. During World War II, I explained, watching their faces carefully, this coastline was used for all sorts of classified purposes. Our grandfather, as a prominent builder, was contracted to create secure storage facilities for wealthy European families sending their valuables out of the war zone. This bunker was one of them. That's impossible, Derek stammered, but I could see him doing the math in his head. The contents were supposed to remain sealed and hidden for 80 years, I continued. Aunt Eleanor inherited the secret from our grandfather, documented everything, and waited. Do you want to know what's inside? Before they could answer, a distinguished-looking man in a well-cut suit approached us, expertly navigating the sandy beach. Ms. Reed? James Morrison from Christie's. I hope I'm not too early, but after your call about the Rothschild collection. Victoria's knees actually buckled. Derek had to grab her arm to keep her upright. The what? She whispered. I smiled, remembering the inventory lists I found among Aunt Eleanor's papers. It turns out this worthless beach house is sitting on top of one of the largest collections of European art and antiquities evacuated during the war. Pieces that were thought to be lost forever, all carefully documented and legally stored here by our grandfather. But that would be worth. Derek couldn't even finish the sentence. Early estimates suggest around $40 million, Mr. Morrison supplied helpfully. And that's before considering the historical significance of the find itself. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. You can't prove any of this. The main estate. Actually, I cut in. Aunt Eleanor left very detailed records. She spent decades quietly paying property taxes on the full value of the land and its contents, all documented. She knew exactly when the classified period would end and timed everything perfectly, even her death, in a way. I turned to Mr. Morrison. I believe we discussed a private viewing for serious buyers on Friday, followed by the main auction on Monday. He nodded, already tapping on his tablet. The international interest is intense. We've had inquiries from major museums and collectors worldwide. Ms. Reed, would you like to begin the process of opening the vault? Derek stepped forward, lawyer mode engaging. Now wait just a minute. As executors of the main estate, have no claim whatsoever, I finished for him. I have the original contracts, the property deeds, and Aunt Eleanor's explicit instructions. But don't worry, you're both welcome to attend the auction. As guests, of course. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. News crews descended on Little Hampton. Historians argued about the significance of the find, and art experts practically wept as each new piece was carefully cataloged. The bunker had been expertly designed and maintained. Everything inside was perfectly preserved. Victoria tried to contest the will, of course. That failed spectacularly when her own lawyers saw Aunt Eleanor's documentation. Derek attempted to claim executors' rights over the find, only to be shut down by 3 separate courts in record time. The morning of the auction, I stood in the kitchen of the beach house, my beach house, drinking coffee from Aunt Eleanor's old pottery mug. The same real estate agent who had dismissed the property as teared-down material just a week ago had called yesterday with an offer of $5 million for the house alone, now that it was famous. I declined. Some things are worth more than money. The auction itself exceeded everyone's expectations. Museums around the world bid furiously for pieces of the collection. When the final gavel fell, the total approached $43 million. I donated a significant portion to arts education programs, something Aunt Eleanor would have appreciated, and set up a foundation to preserve historically significant properties along the coast. Derek and Victoria, they got their mansion and their millions, but they also got something they didn't expect, her reputation. In every article about the discovery, in every TV special about the found artwork, the story of how they treated Aunt Eleanor came out. In their social circles, that kind of thing matters. The beach house still stands today, restored but not modernized. I live there now, running my architectural firm from the upstairs office where Aunt Eleanor once sat planning her masterpiece of patience and timing. The boat shed has been turned into a small museum. documenting the history of the bunker and the woman who kept it secret for so long. Sometimes, during storms, I sit in the kitchen and watch the waves, thinking about value and worth, about patience and karma. On the wall hangs my favorite piece from the collection, a small watercolor of the beach house as it looked in the 1970s, painted by one of the European artists who'd stored their work here. Beneath it is a photograph of Aunt Eleanor, young and smiling, standing in front of her worthless beach house. The frame holds a note she wrote to me, found among her papers. "Real wealth isn't in what you own, my dear, but in what you understand." Some people look at a humble beach house and see only what they can take. Others look deeper and find treasure. Always look deeper. Last week, Victoria's daughter, my cousin once removed, came to visit. She's studying architecture in college and wanted to see the house that everyone in the family still talks about. I took her on a tour, showed her the clever ways her great-aunt had preserved both the house and its secret, and watched her eyes light up with understanding. "But how did she know you'd figure it out?" she asked as we sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee from Aunt Eleanor's old mugs. I smiled, remembering all those summer days spent here, learning about architecture, history, and patience from a woman who saw value in everything. "Because she taught me to look past the surface," I replied. "And sometimes, that's where you find the real treasure." The girl nodded thoughtfully, then asked if she could intern at my firm over the summer. I hired her on the spot. After all, Aunt Eleanor taught me something else too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about passing on the wisdom to the next generation. As for the beach house, it's still here, still standing strong against the modern mansions rising around it. And if there are any other secrets hidden in its walls or beneath its foundations, well, I learned from the best about the value of patience. Some treasures, after all, are worth waiting for.